Good afternoon, everyone. We're so excited to have you join us at Longmont Startup Week 2021. I'm Lori Jones, President and CEO of Avocet Integrated Marketing. We're thrilled to have you join an incredible lineup of speakers this afternoon, including Angela Heyroth. Angela Heyroth. I'm going to get that wrong a few times today.
That's
who
okay.
is going to speak about the counter resignation, a really, really important talk on how difficult it is to hire today and what you can do to retain talent. And then at the 1 o'clock hour, we're going to move into heart-centered leadership, a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And we'll have Kate Nelligan, Nathan Muramitsu, and Kenda Prospero join the panel at that time. And then we're going to round out the rest of the day with Mark Ward of Ward Electric, who's going to talk about entrepreneurial leadership realities, what it means to lead 24/7. Before we get there, though, I'm going to thank some of our sponsors. Our platinum sponsors, ARC Thrift Stores, Avocet Communications, Ward Electric, and Longmont Economic Development Partnership. Our gold sponsors, BizWest, Left Hand Brewing, and Docketly. And then our connected sponsors, Downtown Longmont and High Plains Bank. And then in kind, a ton of you to thank, Hand Print Inc., Circle Graphics, Sticker Giant, and Chop 5. Thank you so much for your sponsorships. We could not do it without you this year. Angela Heyroth, her 20-year career has spanned several Fortune 500 firms in leadership roles across the full life cycle of talent management and employee experience, delivering results and guiding teams in talent attraction, acquisition, retention, development, performance planning, and engagement. This distinctively broad experience has resulted in a unique understanding of how to build and deliver lasting legacy through a focus on talent. Now as the founder of Talent Lifecycle Designs, guided by the belief that every company deserves access to intentionally designed talent programs, Angela builds custom experiences for organizations in one part or many parts of the talent lifecycle. Angela, take it away.
May need technical help.
So I was here on Monday. There are people to come to the rescue. So there is Dave, who's going to help you get that up on screen.
I just missed the share button. That's all it was. Thank you. All right. If there's one thing that keeps me up at night, says this Prudential executive, it's the talent flight risk. Does that worry you too? If you have people who work for you, it should. Why? Well, they're calling it the Great Resignation, and it's alarming. Let me tell you a little bit about it. The data is in, and in April 2021, 4 million Americans resigned from their jobs, the highest in 20 years. 4 million. Let that sit for a second. That is 2 times the size of Metro Denver, and that's 1 month. Statistics vary, but I've seen studies and reports that 20, 30, 40, even upwards of 50% of your people are considering leaving. Some are even saying 80 or 90%. Are you worried yet? To bring this into reality, I have a client who year over year for 2 decades has had a fairly consistent turnover rate of 15%. Yet suddenly, it's more than doubled to 35%. This is real, and it's happening everywhere, even lately making national headlines, like these 2 instances. Did you see these? These happened this month, in July 2021. On the left, a Starbucks in California, where the employees posted on TikTok that they were fed up and quitting. And on the right, at a Burger King in Nebraska, the employees took to the company sign to announce their joint resignation. Now, the professionalism and choices involved here are lacking, But I share this because it takes it beyond the data in a headline and to reality. People really are quitting en masse. You worried? What if I put this in dollars and cents for you? Turnover is expensive. One estimate is that it takes 20% of a person's annualized pay to replace them. So in my little example here on the screen, if you have 50 people and you lose a conservative 25%, that's 13, at an average pay of $50,000, you take a hit of $130,000. Not to mention lost customer relationships, loss in productivity, disengagement of those who remain, etc. Now, why? Why is this happening? Why are so many people suddenly quitting? This is certainly not a year ago what I thought we'd be talking about in the summer of 2021. Well, it could be that it's pent up from a year of lockdown. People that were planning on leaving over the last several months and have waited for various reasons, and now we're feeling it all at once. It could be they've come into some money with how well the stock market's been doing and how well housing's been doing, and they're exiting for early retirement. It could be that they're seeking remote roles or roles where they feel safer, and their current job just isn't conducive to that. Really, across any of these, though, the bottom line is this. People have found their voice. The pandemic taught them, really taught all of us, that life is too precious to waste somewhere where you're not enjoying it, where you're unhappy. People are no longer okay with bad bosses and stressful environments and dead-end jobs. They're no longer okay being disengaged. They're no longer okay with poor employee experiences. In the past, they may have become disengaged but then stayed but been unhappy. Today, the difference is they're taking action. To make this crystal clear, creating great experiences at work is not a luxury for the biggest brands like Apple and Google. It's a must for all of you, provided that you want to solve for this great resignation. To level set, when I say experiences at work, I'm talking about two big sets of experiences. This is the employee or talent life cycle the way I see it. On the left side, the magnet, is the talent attraction side. You pull people in to apply to your openings, attracting them like a magnet. This leads to growing them and letting them flourish like a plant in your company, and therefore another set of experiences like training and performance management. And the middle represents your culture, what you want everything to be aligned to. So let's look at each side of this cycle, the attraction side first, through something called the candidate experience. If you need to create great experiences at work, you start here. Because the current recruiting experience, as you see here, is exasperating. Where candidates, in this case, feel burned by a convoluted or confusing process. Or sometimes even a hostile or a nasty experience. Oh my. These posts aren't just complaints about a poor employee experience. They reflect the new reality that with the click of one button, a candidate will tell hundreds or thousands of people about their bad experience with you. And what's the impact? Not only will others be discouraged from applying, but you may lose consumers as well. So you counter this with a great candidate experience, which has these 4 elements. First, why? Give people a reason to want to apply and to come to your organization. Remember, people today more than ever have a choice of where they go to employment. So attract them to your opportunity. For instance, instead of using your job postings as just boring role descriptions, use them as advertisements. Entice people to see themselves in that role and in your company. This means you need to know who you are, how you describe your culture, and then tell people about it on those postings and in interviews and everywhere. Next, the dreaded black hole or ghosting. Perhaps you really like a candidate, but there are some things going on in the background of your decision process that are slowing some things down. So you wait to get back to them. But you know what they're feeling? They don't like me. I guess I better look somewhere else. And now you've lost a good candidate. Counter this by over-communicating and keeping them updated across every stage in the process, from interview to selection, even to decline. Put a reminder on your task list or your calendar or wherever it makes sense to you to check in every few days, even if you don't have an update. This is the best way to keep somebody warm. And if you know they're not a right fit, decline them quickly and professionally so they can move on. Next, be caring and supportive. This is not about coddling. It's about caring about the reality of what a candidate is going through when they're in a job search process. Maybe you scheduled an interview during their workday with their current employer and they can't leave. Or maybe they are in the middle of picking up their child right when you called to ask them if they're interested in talking with you. You need to be flexible about your timing and how you reach out, always asking if this is working for them. Another tip related to showing you care is to shepherd the candidate through your interview process. It's always best when people show their best and their real selves up in the interview process. It helps you evaluate them and assess them as a fit to your company more accurately than a traditional stress interview does. So tell them where to park. Tell them who they're interviewing with. Tell them how to prepare. Maybe even give them a few tips on what interview questions you'll be asking. Again, you'll be better able to assess their fit for your organization. This whole element of showing you care is really about putting yourselves in the candidate's shoes and practicing the golden rule. This is really just the human thing to do, but for some reason when it comes to candidates, sometimes we forget. Last, and perhaps maybe most important when it comes to candidate experience, is to define a clear interview and selection process that is consistent across and throughout. Across for all candidates, and throughout for each individual candidate. So some tips on this one: ask the same questions in the same way of every candidate for the same role. Everyone who is part of the experience should be trained and polished to think of recruiting as marketing. Use similar language to describe the company and the environment across everybody who's involved in the process. Know who the candidate last interviewed with and who they're interviewing next so that you can help make those connections. Finally, be congruent with who you really are. Don't try to sell the candidate on something that's not reality. So for instance, if you can wear jeans, but most people don't wear jeans, don't sell the candidate on this being a casual environment. Have it be reality and congruent with who you really are. So the 4 elements of a great candidate experience then: give them a reason why to see themselves at your company. Never ghost. Demonstrate care and feeling, and ensure consistency across your process and congruence to your environment. If you do these things, you'll attract people to you just like that magnet, a counter to the Great Resignation. But I want to make one caveat. This is not just about attraction. When you turn a magnet the opposite direction, what happens? It repels. When you've built a great candidate experience, you attract those who are the right fit, and you repel those who aren't. That's part of the goal, because that saves you resignations in the long run. Now let's move on to the other side of the talent life cycle, how people grow and develop. This really centers on answering this question: what do people want at work? I'll give you a hint. It's not a ping pong table. Even though many would have you believe it is, check out some of these headlines. The easy workplace culture energizer, creating community and well-being at work. This isn't to say that maybe ping pong isn't the right thing for your organization, but it's not the answer about what people are actually seeking at work. And it's not a shortcut to replacing a real set of employee experiences, though it's been used for that. In fact, what people are seeking is a great environment, an engaging climate, shared values. This is really what culture is. Culture is who you are as an organization. Deloitte, as you see here, found that 95% of employees say that culture, those elements of good environment, engaging climate, shared values, are more important than pay. 95%. So how do you create a good culture? How do you create a place where people want to be? It's all about belonging. All of us, regardless of age, race, educational background, types of positions, we are wired to want to belong somewhere. This is what makes us human. So you need a place, an environment, a set of experiences that drive that fundamental sense of belonging. How? Well, let's explore 4 keys to creating a belonging environment. The first is having flexibility, choice, and autonomy. This essentially means that people want to be able to manage their life and their work in a flow and with a freedom that works best for them. People will trade almost anything for increased freedom. We have our ancestors to thank for that. I know this because I had a survey posted on LinkedIn where I asked people, what are the best corporate perks? What was the ones that were most important to them? 503 people answered the question, and an overwhelming 377, or 75%, said flexibility. That ranked far over the other options that I'd given of more time off, better medical coverage, gym discounts, and childcare benefits. Now I realize that LinkedIn is very white collar, and so this is skewed, but it's still a fascinating informal data point. In other words, people will exchange other benefits and perks for flexibility. They'll even exchange compensation for flexibility. And multiple studies show that people will even leave an employer if flexibility is not an option, or if it was and it's being taken away. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. You're thinking this is all about remote or hybrid work, and you may be in an environment that isn't conducive to that. Hear me now. Flexibility is not necessarily remote or hybrid. It could mean flexibility in the way people do their work, or the hours in which they do them, or which days they work on, or a myriad of other options that help people feel freedom for their choices. The best way to figure out which works for you and what is important to your people is simply to ask them. Ask them, what does flexibility mean to you? What kind of freedom is important to you? And then do what you can to fit it into your environment. The next element to creating a workplace that centers on belonging is to give people challenges and the ability to make an impact. We humans, we want to feel like what we do matters. So 1, challenge people with impactful work. Don't think they're capable? You might be surprised. Most people will rise to the challenge you put before them. 2, develop and mentor them, or give them time to take a class or 2. 3, make sure they know how what they do leads to results for the company. Even if it's a distant connection, everyone should be able to articulate how what they do is connected to the company purpose. I once led a session where we wrote customer up on the whiteboard, and we asked everybody to line up to how close or how far they were from the customer. Now, sales and customer service lined up closest, as they should. And then behind them came various groups until eventually we got to the accountants and the tech people and the HR folks. But the point wasn't where they were in the line. It was that they were all part of the line. In various ways, they all impacted the customer experience, and therefore these particular company profits. And that connection helps people belong. This is an easy exercise to mimic. So again, you help people feel like they're making an impact by challenging them with impactful work, developing them and mentoring them, and helping them know how what they do leads to the bigger results. And then 4, people feel connected when they're part of something bigger than themselves. So if you give back to the community through donations or volunteering, shout it out. Remind your employees about it a lot. It gives them a reason to be proud and to belong. And if you aren't doing this, start. It can be as simple as a canned food drive or a toy drive in your office, or a park cleanup done as a team. The next key to belonging is feeling recognized and appreciated. And while I've used a trophy here, it's not really about trophies. We all want to feel cared about, appreciated for what we do, and seen as people. So say thank you. Give public kudos. Think about Employee of the Month and other type of similar awards. Provide lunch occasionally. Show gratitude for extra work with gift cards or tangible items like that if you're able to. Simply feeling like people appreciate you propels commitment, it propels self-confidence, it propels well-being, it propels productivity, and yes, belonging. 85% of employees say that if they were told they were valued just once a week, they would be dramatically more engaged. And yet less than half of that report that they are told they are valued. What is the downside here? What are you waiting for? Say thank you. This is why I like to say that gratitude is the heartbeat of engagement. The last element to creating a belonging environment is to create real connections and collaboration. When you're connected to people at work, you're healthier, you use less sick days, you have less absenteeism, you have less workplace accidents, you're more likely to stay longer, and you're more productive. Why? You belong. This is why Gallup is famous, or maybe infamous, for asking if you have a best friend at work. They're trying to assess your connections and how deep those are. So, ask people how they are and actually mean it. Check in with them regularly, not just in quarterly performance reviews. Ask them for referrals of their friends when you have an opening so that you're creating some of those connections. Celebrate birthdays and anniversaries. Break rooms, office trivia games, going for a walk together, and yes, maybe even that ping pong table, all lead to deeper connections, which lead to deeper belonging, and therefore retention. None of these elements that we've just talked about are generational or white collar or blue collar. They are human. If you design experiences across your talent lifecycle that point back to these elements, those experiences will be engaging. And if you have an engaging environment where people belong, why in the world would they ever consider leaving? This is your biggest counter to the Great Resignation. Build a culture that is so great that no one wants to leave. I'll conclude with this really powerful statement that I read recently. You can try to outspend the competition, or you can try to outculture them. Create a place that makes employees feel special, a place that makes them feel like they're part of the bigger whole, a place where they continually get to learn and evolve, a place where everyone actually likes each other. If you create a culture like that, who would want to leave? Plus, you'll get the best minds out there knocking on your door to get in. This was from Randy Nelson of Pixar when they were still an independent small company. Now, I realize that I've made much of this sound easier than it really is. So if I can help come alongside you as you design your experiences, please do get in touch. Thank you so much and look forward to the conversation, Lori.
Well, I tell you, I am too. We have just a ton of questions that have come in. So this is a very, very hot topic today, and one that I think is on the top of mind of so many employers and managers, and that is ultimately how are we going to keep people, keep them happy, keep our customers happy, and grow the business at the same time. because not all those things are adding up right now.
Right.
We take 5 steps forward, and then we lose a couple team members, we land a huge account, and we've got to deliver. What advice do you have, truly, and we've got a ton of questions about culture, what advice do you have for our viewers today regarding the number one thing that they can do to retain a team member with so much happening, so many moving parts internally?
I think the easiest and biggest thing you can do is have a conversation with people. Ask them what engages them. Ask them what is important to them in a workplace, and see what you can do to fit those things into your process. I've given you some basic ideas here, but they're not necessarily custom for your organization. Don't guess. Don't guess what matters to people. That's what we do a lot as employers, and give them the benefit that they know best. I did that once for a company, and I told the CEO I was going to go ask his employees what mattered to them, and he said, "Angela, please don't do it. They're going to say they want free espresso machines. I just know it." And I said, let's just see what they say. And after some time doing the focus groups, the first thing I came back with is I said, "Guess what? They want espresso machines."
Let's do it.
And then I said, of course, I was kidding.
Yeah.
After I saw his shocked look on his face. It was really, I told him every conversation I had was about, I want to feel trusted. I want to feel like I have some freedom in the choices that I make. I want to feel connected to what's going on. None of it was about espresso machines or dogs at work or some of the other things he was concerned
the appreciation.
about. Right. And just having that conversation itself becomes engaging, because now they know you actually care to know what matters to them.
You mentioned trust. It's obviously one of the key tenets of any employer-employee relationship. And years ago, IBM was allowing all their team members to work remotely, and for many years they allowed that. And about 2-3 years ago, they started pulling everyone in because they saw productivity going way down. And then, of course, COVID happens, and we are all remote for the most part for a very, very long time period. And you must trust at that stage.
Yes.
What advice do you have for our listeners and viewers today regarding how they can build up trust with their remote workers, and what are the brass tacks about how you can create accountability with productivity?
I think that the biggest thing to trust, really, when you understand what trust is to demonstrate that I do believe that you can do this. I'm not going to watch over your back, because that's counter to trust. And most people, again, will rise to the level of trust that you show in them. Certainly, there's exceptions, and you should manage to those exceptions. But if you create policies around the exceptions, then you're going to create the distrust from the majority of your people who really are doing a great job and are exemplifying what you want them to do. So just showing that I care about you, I do trust, even just saying that word, I trust you to do what's best. I trust you to manage this in the way that works best for you, and I will back off, and we'll see what happens. And then be ready to come alongside if you do need to provide a little push in the direction of how often they need to check in with you, or whatever it is that's kind of maybe stopping that experience for you. A lot of it, though, is on the leader, more so than the person. A leader often has a hard time showing trust, because when you show trust, you automatically lose control.
Right.
And sometimes we equate control with leadership. And so sometimes it's just that internal realization that I need to be okay not having control, so that I can show more trust, so that they can rise to the occasion.
Culture and remote working seem counterintuitive, right? And you can only have so many happy hours when you're watching people on screen. And one thing that we did immediately, March 13th, once COVID happened, I was worried about productivity. I was worried about meeting deadlines. I was worried about this incredible culture that we built that was out the door. I thought maybe a couple weeks, and here we were months and months and months into it. So one of the epiphanies that I had was the human touch would not be there. How could we recreate that human interaction? So we immediately implemented a morning tag up at 8:30, where we just went down the rundown of the day. People were able to interact with one another, laugh with one another, and then we did an afternoon tag up at 3:30 each day. that human touch, that human interaction really helped the team to feel like they were a team.
Yep.
But the bottom line is once we were back into the office, the culture was magnetic again. What advice do you have for our Longmont startuppers on what they can do to maintain a culture with remote working?
I think you first have to define what makes your culture tick. You talked about for you, it was that magnetic connections to each other. So you had to find ways to keep that in a remote environment. That may be different for different companies. So what is your magic sauce? What makes your culture really special? And then find ways to make that work with a remote environment. You know, it's interesting. Initially, when we all went to remote, I heard that a lot from people. I feel like I'm not connected to anybody anymore. I feel lonely. I feel like I don't have a team anymore. But I think that's because we didn't know how to do this. This was new for so many people. Even if they had done remote once in a while, it wasn't every day, all day.
Right.
And let's remember, if we rewind the clock to a year ago, we also had our kids, our spouses, and everybody else in the house all at the same time, and we couldn't leave. We couldn't go anywhere.
Right.
And so remote work in that environment was very different than the way remote work is looking today.
And I think productivity also increased
Yes.
for most employers
It did.
during that time. So, you know, the mindset that remote working would decrease productivity, I think because we were all so concerned and scared and, you know, we didn't know what was going to happen next, the work ethic just got stronger.
Right. And engagement went up. That's never happened at a macro level before. Every company that measures macro engagement, Gallup, Glint, several others, all measured a sizable increase in engagement during that period.
Yeah, I believe it.
And gee, what was different? It was that people were home. And it was that for the first time they were having breakfast with their kids, or they were able to walk their dog in the middle of the day. And they started to realize what they had been missing. And I think that's then what you need to be careful of if you're returning back to the office. You want that secret sauce back, like you talked about, but you don't want people feeling like they've gotten something in their life that they've never had before.
Right.
And now they're giving it back up. So that's where finding that balance in a couple of days here and there, or let's be really flexible about what time you show up, or whatever you can do that is conducive in your environment to help them feel like they're holding on to that freedom that they've found is so important.
It really is. We've got a lot of questions coming in, and I'm going to ask one of my questions first because I think it's a good segue to some of these that are coming through. We've talked about culture and the importance of it. Retention completely ties into that. Finding people right now is very difficult. It's not easy. And you went through during your talk today some incredible ways in which we can find great people. We do a lot of recruitment, advertising, talent attraction, marketing, and people do need to up their game. You can't just put an ad up on Indeed right now that looks like every other ad out there. I spoke on Monday about differentiation. It is absolutely key right now with talent attraction programs that you differentiate and that you don't sound like every other HR recruiter out there. So we're bringing great candidates in. Where are you finding the best candidate pool coming from? Is it through a recruiter, or can you get great candidates through an Indeed or a Monster?
Yeah, it's in recruiting we call that post and pray.
Yeah.
You post and you pray the right people are going to find the posting.
I like that. I'm going to write that down as a matter of fact.
Yes, it's a terrible strategy because you're just hoping and praying that the right person is going to magically find that posting and decide that it sounds enticing enough to click on apply. So it's not a good strategy. That's why you want to do that more proactive attraction. And I do love that you've correlated it to marketing because so many people forget that recruiting really is more marketing than HR. And so really thinking of it like that, what is it that I'm marketing? How is it that I'm pulling people in? Crafting that job post as an advertisement is really, really important. And then I would say the number one way to find people is through your current people.
Right, yeah. I think that's fantastic. And even referrals through LinkedIn, asking people to reach out to their, another component.
And your customers, too. Do you know of people, your customers and your partners? Do you know of people that would be, you know how we work, you know what works here, who can you recommend for us? Because great people know more great people.
Right. Staying on marketing for a second, because that's in my wheelhouse. Messaging is key. What I see in a lot of the recruitment advertising that is out there right now is, everyone's talking about themselves, the great culture, the great business, the great opportunities, and it does sound, if they can twist that so that it's more people first.
Yes.
And that you're truly talking about what the individual can gain through working at that business, that in and itself will go a long way to differentiate you from other employers.
That's the biggest shift I make when I rewrite job postings for people. They always start with all of the great stuff about their company. And for whatever reason, that's how they always start. And I always take that and shift it to the bottom.
Yeah.
And then I rewrite the whole thing in that second person voice. You will do this, and you are this kind of person. That helps somebody see themselves in your organization, and that's the very first thing they should read.
Yeah.
So they're excited about the role first, and then way down later on, they read about why you as an employer are exciting. So you need to have that mirror.
It's really strategic storytelling. One of our aerospace clients, we developed an ad for them that was bringing the childlike mindset of that little boy, that little girl, looking up to the moon at a very young age and thinking to themselves, I'm going to be an aerospace engineer. You bring that emotion back to the ad, and then you tell them that they're going to work on the Mars lander or whatever it might be, and that is really exciting.
Yeah.
And that, again, is that emotional epiphany that you can create with people-first messaging that humanizes it and helps them really imagine themselves being there and a part of the team.
Or you probably grew up wanting to be an astronaut, and you never got to that moment, but now you can work with astronauts, right? So you appeal to that emotional connection, because that's what so much of this is.
Yeah, I love that. A lot of companies are having their team member, like a Myers-Briggs test, some sort of psychological test, not only to equivocate whether or not they can get the job done, but will they be a good cultural fit? What tests do you suggest our audience might deploy, if any? I don't know if you believe in them or not. To ultimately help narrow down whether or not this person is going to be harmonious within that culture, or perhaps be a little bit of an outcast?
I would be really careful with assessments. One of the biggest reasons is they have not lasted through a lot of legislation. So I know some of the folks that we're talking to may not be at the size company where they would need to be concerned about some of the affirmative action type of requirement out there. But it is often it does often fail that test. Where it is potentially discriminatory against any one set of protected folks, and then you cannot use those assessments. And so they often fail those tests, and I really am very cautious about those kinds of assessments because of that, unless you can really prove that this is directly correlated to what we know is provable and works at this company, and even then you have to be very careful. I would say it's one of the worst things we have, and yet it's the best thing we have, and that's an interview. If you do the interview correctly, and the way you do an interview correctly is you list out what's important to me, what are the competencies and the behaviors that I really need in this role. Don't ask, do you have 5.2 years of Java programming experience? Ask, can you give me an example of a time when when you were challenged to show you trusted your employees, or whatever the competency is, and ask for an example about it. And if they can't give you an example, they're probably not going to be a right fit for your organization. It's the best thing we have today, until we get robots that can just go into your brain and know that you're going to be the best fit. It really is the best way to assess somebody, because those assessments, it's a great idea, but I haven't found one yet that can pass that muster.
Yeah, that's great insight. Dan is asking, is there free or paid source for typical wages and benefits in the local area that he can kind of gauge whether or not his pay scale is where it should be?
From a free perspective, because we have the Equal Pay Act now in Colorado where you do have to post your pay, actually just going out to Indeed or Glassdoor or those kinds of places and seeing if you've got some talent competitors in the space, assuming they're abiding by the law, not everybody is, you can actually look right up and see today. That's one of both the up and downsides with that legislation, that you can get that information.
That's great.
The best way to get that information, though, is to pay for it. Places like Mountain States Employers Council and other areas will have salary surveys for you that are based on really technical data, and they can make sure that they've assessed it in the right way for your size organization, your industry, the level that you're hiring for. But just a quick search on Indeed will give you a baseline.
That's great. And I'm going to put a plug in here for Mountain States as well. It is an incredible value.
Yes.
And an incredible resource, especially, I mean, we've been in business 41 years, and it has paid for itself time and time and time again.
It's like insurance or AAA. You
it
hope
really
you
is.
never need it, but if you do.
And it doesn't matter if you're a startup or, you've been in business a long time, the investment is absolutely worth it. You mentioned something that I thought was really interesting during the talk, and it surrounded the fact that the importance of pay compared to culture, compared to benefits, and people value culture 95%. 95% of the time it's like number one on their list. I assume that is within knowing that they're within a great pay scale.
Yes, good point. Yes, there's probably everybody's heard of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, which is an interesting kind of psychological study from an HR standpoint. But the better one, if you ever want to look it up, is by Herzberg, Herz Berg, and he has a concept, and he called it. He didn't call it satisfiers and dissatisfiers. It was a hygiene factors, I think is what he called it. And it was back, I think, in the 30s or 40s when terminology was a little different. But what he talks about is what satisfies people at work and what dissatisfies people at work. And he has pay on the dissatisfied side. And what dissatisfied means is once I've gotten to the point that I feel like I'm paid what I'm worth, no additional pay is going to satisfy me more.
Right.
You're never going to turn it down, right? I'll always take more pay. But that is not going to buy me like all of the other things he has on the satisfier list in terms of feeling motivated and feeling cared about and feeling appreciated and all of those things. So it's not that it doesn't matter, but once you've gotten people to that market rate, you need other things to really bring them along.
Right. Yeah, I think that's important. Many more questions here. Let's make sure that we haven't covered some of these already. Some business owners believe in hiring slow and firing fast. Does this phenomenon reverse the philosophy that we're really talking about today?
Yeah, if I let me make sure I reflect that back to the audience that it's about making sure that you're finding the right fit. And that you're going slow enough to ensure that you find the right person, but once you've decided they're not the right person, it's better to get them out the door quickly. I would agree with that. I don't think it's necessarily reversed this day and age. I do think the hire slow is with an asterisk next to it maybe, because we can't. We're all bleeding. We've got the fire hose turned on us. We need people right now. So you need to be able to make those decisions pretty quickly. If you don't, they've got another employer like literally next door to you that they can walk in and get hired by. So you need to go a little bit quicker in the hiring process. I would agree though on the other side that once you've determined somebody's not a fit and you've done a performance improvement plan and you've decided that this is just not the right person, it's much better to just exit them very graciously but quickly. It's better for the health of your organization.
Right. Dave asks, are there any onboarding tips and tricks that can help keep new employees feeling the connection to their new family? And let's talk about that from the standpoint if they're remote.
Yes.
And then from the standpoint of, if they're actually in the office.
Yeah, onboarding is a whole other topic. I think that onboarding is often done really poorly. When we think of onboarding as paperwork, I have a client who, when I first started working with them, I literally used a 416-page document that every single page had a signature line. that the person had to sign. And it was policy after policy after policy after policy, including outdated policies, by the way, saying that women had to wear pantyhose. They weren't even used anymore, but they still kept them in this 416-page document because that was easier than not using it. If you instead think of onboarding, go back to that belonging statement. If onboarding is about accelerating somebody's belonging, think about how you do that in your organization. You probably have stories that new hires don't know. You probably have terminology that new hires don't know. You probably have little places either physically in the building, if you're in the building, or to know about in terms of how we work on Zoom or other video tips that they wouldn't know without you telling them. So for example, if you're IMing each other, do you say hi first before you start talking, or do you just start talking? That's a very cultural implication, and every company is a little different. A new hire won't know that unless you tell them. So think about ways that you accelerate belonging. Think of that as onboarding instead of orienting them to a bunch of paperwork, and then you will be more successful in terms of driving that engagement much more quickly.
That's great. I appreciate that insight. That's another one that's not easy. What are some cultural dynamics that can be indicators that someone might be thinking, okay, I'm going to walk?
Yeah. I think of culture as who you are as a company, and you want that to mesh with who the person is and how they work best as well. And when there's is it discongruence? I don't know what the
I'm going to go with it for now.
Sure, we'll made up a word. If there's not something that works together, you can never force fit it. It will always fall apart at some point. The other way congruence works is within the company. So if you say, like my example with jeans, if you say, well, sure, we're going to say we're casual, but then really you never are, you've just created incongruence with what you say versus what you really are. So if you can create congruence internally, but then make sure that everybody you're hiring really wants to be in that kind of environment. It's not to say that any one environment is better than another. It's that this is your environment. Be honest about that and find people that can fit within that.
Well, and with that, Angela Heyroth, thank you so much. We're talking about how to counter the Great Resignation. Your insight has been incredibly valuable today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I forgot to mention something a little earlier to everyone. We have got some partying happening after the event today. And actually, it's not here on my list. So I'm going to talk to you about that a little bit later on. Oh, nope, here it is. It's on the next page. Copper Sky Distillery at 4 o'clock today, and Quarters Bar and Arcade, 4 o'clock today. See us there, be there or be square. How about that? And we are up next. We're going to be talking about the heart-centered leadership with Kate Nelligan, Nathan Mortimisu, and Kendra Prospero. Thank you very much.